Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. My name is Julian, and in today's episode, we're continuing the series of episodes that I've been making every single day almost about each individual NHL team. We're going in alphabetical order, and we've reached the New Jersey Devils. Now, the Devils are an interesting team this year. They have a lot of young pieces that are continuing to add on to the team and are getting better and better every single year. This offseason, they signed guys like Ondrej Palat, which makes their team a little bit better. Now, how do I project them during the season, and what do I think about their noteworthy players, and whether I think you should draft them? Well, stay tuned later in the video. Now, we're going to do something a little bit new in this video. We have this Devils jersey right behind me. It's number 14. So guys, let me know down in the comments whose name you think is on the back of this jersey, and I'll let you know if you were right. Alright guys, now before we get started, hit that like, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And if you do want to take your support to the next level, the link to my Patreon is in the description of this video. Let's get started, and let's start with the Devils' projected lines that I'm projecting for this season. On the top line, I have Ondrej Palat, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt. Second line, Yegor Sharangovich, Nico Hischier, and Dawson Mercer. And on the third line, I have Thomas Tatar, Erik Haula, and Andreas Johnsson. Alright, and first one, let's have Jack Hughes, who finished the season last year as the 52nd best fantasy player, which is really, really good. And obviously, he's going at an ADP of 96.6, so obviously, you think that's really, really good value. But that shooting percentage that he had last year, as well as his on-ice shooting percentage, was a little bit higher last year, so I'm expecting him to regress a little bit, but I still think he does fit inside his ADP. I think he's going to be around the 80th best player this year. And I only have him as a so-so option because he is a natural center, and there's so many good natural centers later in the draft that are better value than Jack Hughes, that are being drafted more than 20 positions later than where they're going to finish. So Jack Hughes, if you draft him, not a bad pick, but just not my favorite pick in the entire draft. Then I have Dougie Hamilton, and I do really like Dougie Hamilton last year. He finished as the 160th best fantasy player last year, and that was a pretty bad season. Still didn't end up finishing too badly overall on the season. I'm expecting a pretty nice bounce back this year. Dougie Hamilton usually in the past has had a weaker season on his first year with a new team. I'm expecting him to shoot the puck a lot like he did last year. He's going to get that top power play time, should get a lot of points. I'm expecting him to definitely live up to that ADP, like him at the ADP of 104. Then I have Jesper Bratt, who had an amazing breakout season last year, was almost a point per game with 73 points in 76 games, finished as the 93rd best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game, which was really, really good. His shooting percentage was a tad high at 13.2, but I'm expecting another strong season for Jesper Bratt, and I think he's very, very, very good value at his current ADP. I think he's going to finish significantly ahead of that, going to get consistent top power play and top line time. Definitely like Jesper Bratt this year. Next is Damon Severson, who's currently going at ADP of 160. Last year, he finished as the 211th best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game. Now, he did very, very well towards the end of the year in New Jersey because he was playing on that top power play because Dougie Hamilton was struggling. Now, as I already said, I don't expect Dougie Hamilton's struggles to continue. I think Dougie Hamilton's one of the best defensemen in the entire league. I think he's really, really outstanding. And for that reason, I don't have Severson in my top 50D. Obviously, if he did play a full season on that top power play, he probably would live up to this ADP, but I'm not expecting that to be the case. And that's why I don't have Severson ranked in my top 50 defensemen at all. And then I have John Marino, who for some reason people are drafting at 162.2. Guys, this is honestly laughable. Last year, he finished as the 543rd best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game on a much better Pittsburgh Penguins team. I have no idea why anybody's drafting this guy. Marino is not going to have any kind of value in fantasy this year. That's probably going to be the easiest call I make this entire preseason. Then I have Nico Hischier, who last year had a really nice year, was finally able to stay mostly healthy, and managed to record 60 points in 70 games. Finishes the 114th best player in terms of fantasy points per game. So as you can see here, guys, he finished as the 114th best player, and he's currently being drafted at 163. That's pretty good value. Almost 50 spots later than where he was finishing last year is where he's being drafted, which is absolutely fantastic. Very good value. Again, he's a natural center, so not super valuable with the position, but he's definitely a natural center that's going much later and is much better value than Jack Hughes, who's only going 20 positions lower than where I projected to finish this year. Then I have Vitek Vancek, who's going at an ADP of 170. And last year had an okay season with Washington. 4 shutouts, 20 wins, an okay save percentage, nothing too crazy, but nothing too terrible. And I think this year he's going to have a nice season with New Jersey. However, I'm not 100% convinced that he's going to be the starting goalie in New Jersey. MacKenzie Blackwood has had a couple of really rough seasons, but I do expect him to have the advantage in being the starting goalie this year. He's really going to have to show what he's made of. This is really his last chance for MacKenzie Blackwood. If he doesn't show that he can be a number 1 goalie, he's not going to be, and Vanecek's definitely going to get the majority of the starts. However, I do think MacKenzie Blackwood, there's an opportunity there for him to have a really awesome bounce back year and show just how good he can be, which is why I'm tempering my expectations for Vanecek. But honestly, I think he's going to get probably 40% of the starts at least this year. And that's not too bad, because he could get a lot more than that too if Blackwood struggles like he has in the past couple of years. And then I have Ondrej Palat, who last year finished as the 153rd best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game on a much better Tampa Bay team, playing a lot with Nikita Kucherov. 49 points only, and honestly, I'm going to pass on him here. He's only going 20 spots later than that, and New Jersey is just not the same team as Tampa Bay is, and Tampa Bay is a lot better. Now, that being said, Palat still probably gets top power play time here in New Jersey, and I don't think he has a particularly bad year, but he's not someone I'm particularly high on this year, even though he's going to get that top line time with Jack Hughes and with Jesper Bratt. That's probably where he's going to slot in. I just don't see him having as much value this year, unfortunately. Although, if you do pick him, I don't think he's an absolutely horrid pick, because he is going to still get that top line time and top power play time. But I don't think he's the best value in the world here. If I'm able to get Palat in the 200s range, that's where I'd start to be like, yes, that's very good value, because he is a top line guy, top power play guy in all likelihood, and that's where I'd like to take him. If you're able to get him in the 200s, he's a much better value pick there. And then I have Erik Haula, which is kind of the same thing. They acquired him over the offseason, and last year he had a really nice season with the Boston Bruins, was playing on a line with Taylor Hall and Pasternak for the majority of the season, and he did really well at all the times that he was playing on that line. But he only ended up as the 183rd best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game. So that's good, but now he's going to be relegated to a 3rd line role on the New Jersey Devils, which is, I just don't see him having the same kind of value that he did last year, and I'm just not looking at Haula for fantasy purposes this year. And then I have Dawson Mercer, who's currently going an ADP of 186, scored 42 points last year, but only finished as the 426th best fantasy player. As you saw in my projected lines, I project him being on that 2nd line in New Jersey this year, which isn't too bad of a deployment for Dawson Mercer, possibly getting top power play time as well. But for Dawson Mercer, I'm not drafting him this year. Not a lot of people are drafting him, so you don't necessarily have to pick him up in your draft. Personally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait and see how he does in the first couple weeks of the season. If he looks absolutely fire and looks like he's going to be a really solid fantasy player this year, I'm definitely going to be suggesting him in my first couple of waiver wire videos for you guys, so you don't have to worry about it, and I'll let you know if Dawson Mercer is worth picking up later on in the season. Then I have Yegor Sharangovich, who finished as the 265th best fantasy player last year with 46 points in 76 games. I have him projected to play on that 2nd line just like Dawson Mercer, and I don't think that's a bad deployment for him, playing with a guy like Nico Hischier. And I think that he's not a bad value in super deep drafts, super late, like one of your absolute last round picks in a very deep draft. Like in a 20-man league, I don't think he's a bad value at all. Sharangovich has a lot of potential. And I think the Belarusian is going to have himself a pretty decent season this year. And last but not least, guys, I have MacKenzie Blackwood, who I already talked about a decent amount when I was talking about Vanecek before. And I think there's a very good chance that he finally has his bounce back season this year and has himself a really good year overall, and could see him something like 60% of the starts this year in New Jersey, which would be really good. Hopefully he can stay healthy and do that. Honestly, he has no ADP right now in fantasy, and he's not being drafted in a lot of leagues at all, which is why I think if you're in a super deep league and you need a goalie really late, MacKenzie Blackwood could be an absolute steal. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. Please leave a like, hit that subscription button, hit that notification bell, and if you do want to take your support to the next level, the link to my Patreon is down below. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.